Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Mind Muscle Connection. I'm Joe Klomozeski with Tyler Weed. We're going to talk about conflict. And we have touched on topics like civility. We've touched on topics like binary versus non-binary thinking. And this week in the Nutrition Coaching Global Mastermind, we had a session where we discussed how to confront colleagues, how to speak up about misinformation and disinformation. And that whole conversation that included a guest host, Leah McGrath, who is a registered dietitian, she really made some points that I thought, man, that is so good to talk about. And it made me kind of synthesize some things a little bit differently. And one of the topics, Tyler, was, first of all, there is the message and there is the messenger. Because when we think of conflict, and I mean like interpersonal conflict, where we're having problems with other people, I think that's a really good place to start. Is this a problem with a comment or a behavior or a philosophy or just some kind of interaction, or do I just deeply not like that person? So I think that's the first thing, if we could have like an XY axis to consider. But then also I would discuss it with myself and think through this in a way that says, is this person really worth having a conflict? I mean, sometimes we want resolution. We really want to repair that relationship. Other times it's an indication that maybe that's just not a person we need to interact with at all. And that gets back to some of our sapient tribal kind of roots, right? So, we have troops and we have tribes and we have clans. And sometimes it's okay to realize I don't have to like everybody. Not everybody has to like me. We can just move on. So there's a lot of stuff I think we can really discuss here. But on that first point, when I first proposed to you, let's talk about conflict. Did your brain immediately go to interpersonal relational conflict?
Yeah, because I think that's where we tend to have most of our conflict in our lives. It's going to be people within that immediate circle, and then as well as if we were to kind of think, there's probably another circle, your acquaintances that you see semi regularly, but they're not quite as part of your intermediate circle. Those are probably where you're going to have the majority of your interpersonal conflicts. Now, obviously, the rise of social media and everyone having their own voice has certainly broadened that, interpersonal conflict of who you can have conflict with. And you can certainly get into a comment war with someone halfway across the world at this point. And that certainly does frequently happen. But I would say the most common one is just going to be those ones closest to you, because those are the ones that you are going to rub up against the most. Those are the ones that you are probably going to have those deeper discussions with. And just, as we spend more time with people, we start to kind of find these little things that maybe we don't really enjoy about them, little peckadoos, as Robin Williams so put in Good Will Hunting when he was telling his story about his wife farting in his sleep. But yeah, I think, that's immediately where my mind went, and how, do we handle those, and how well do we handle those can be, such a big spectrum too.
You made me think of something where I had no concept of even discussing this today, but my wife and I almost got divorced about 10 years ago, and it was over a worldview shift. So we met when we were about 19 years old. 10, 15, 20, 25 years goes by, and one of us was growing in a direction and the other one was not. And pretty soon you wake up and these two people are just no longer connected on every single value and worldview. And there was a part of me, I went to counseling. I asked her to go to counseling. We went to counseling together. And initially I had this major split in my mind. There is no way we can live together with these two diametrically opposed worldviews. Think political, religious, whatever you want. Like, there are just we are on opposite sides of the planet. And yet we've been married for 20 some years. We have 4 children. We loved each other enough to be together in the first place. And so the thing that gnawed at me just constantly was, am I going to let this one thing tear our family apart? So there we are. We have the people, and then you have the thing or the message or the concept. It's the abstract ideology. And I just thought to myself, Tyler, I mean, I went 3, 4, 5 years thinking I'm just going to stay in it. I'm going to see what happens. I don't think this has to tear us apart. And we ended up growing back together in ways. We're still opposed on this worldview, yet it no longer matters. And I had counselors even discuss that with us. Like, why can't two people disagree here and be together? But it was such an emotionally fraught, acute thing that I just didn't know how we were going to make it work. And that's one of my biggest points. Can you, when you face conflict, because you know how everybody says, if you're going to, write that email or you're going to send that tweet or something, like maybe just wait for a day, like let it simmer, come back to it. Like, what great advice, because every time I've ever done that, the next day, it never seems like a big deal. This was a context in my life where I had to say this thing lasted for years, and yet it ended up a situation that we matured ourselves around it. It literally was almost like navigating an obstacle, both of us on different sides of it. We got around the thing, and then we were okay. And I think that's the biggest thing about conflict, is think about the relational implications and then just the information that's causing the strife. And I think that can help separate and maybe tame down some of the emotion around it.
It's funny that, yeah, you do bring that up. I know you and I have had plenty of discussions about that and how, somewhat similar our trajectories have been along that path. And we've, my wife and I, Steph, like, we've had to navigate pretty much the exact same thing, over the last few years. And we maybe never got to a point where, it was going to cause a divorce, or it was, we're going to counseling, but it really forced us to talk and to listen and to challenge our own thinking and to be able to give our thoughts in a very concise way, in a way that, maybe that person can better understand where you are coming from. Because, when you have conflict, it's not just a information. I mean, it's a lot of emotional conflict as well, because we do put, so much emotion into those. Let's just, take these worldviews, for this example. And there is a lot of emotion rooted in that. And so to be able to explain yourself intellectually and emotionally is so vital, because those things just go hand in hand. Because you can have all the intellectual you want, but if that person doesn't know emotionally where you're coming from, it can be very hard to maybe fully understand, because of just our confirmation bias and how much we want to believe what we believe despite the contrary, right? And so I think just to be able to have that emotional intelligence to go, yeah, like this is fucking me up emotionally, and here's why, and here's, the examples and how, can cover a breadth, like that gap where you guys might be missing each other, and give a humanity to, to that viewpoint that can potentially lower those, immediate barriers that come up as soon as we meet someone who has a different viewpoint than ours. We're so quick to say, oh, no, that this is the way, or that, or this. And then we just kind of, boom, barrier goes up and we've got our arguments ready. And so, like you said, like, it's not just the message, it's the messenger. It's not what we're saying, it's how we're saying it.
And you just brought us back to where I think we are in our industry. So I wanted to, talk about that higher end, the relationships that really matter. But then you also brought up social media earlier, in the fact that, this is a new social distraction. I heard a psychiatrist today in a podcast explain it exactly how I've explained it for years. As soon as we had smartphones and social media and everybody's freaking out, and it's just like we've thrown 7 billion rats in a shoebox and everybody's fighting all the time. Everybody has said this is going to be the end of civilization. And I thought, just give it time, give it time. Every time there's something new that comes into humanity, we have to figure it out, and then it settles down. So, all of the memes where, 2, 3, 4 years ago, all these pictures where you could have a family of 10 people at a restaurant and everybody's looking at their phones and everybody was decrying how horrible it is. Well, people have figured that out. Like, people don't have problems with that anymore. And yet with social media, I think because of personality psychology, which is another thing that we've talked about in our Mind Muscle Connection, some people love it. Like some people really want conflict. A counselor one time told me, a friend of mine who happens to be a licensed mental health therapist, I said something somewhat provocative. And this person looked at me and said, "What do you want me to do with that?" And I knew right away that I just said it because I wanted to get a reaction. Like I wanted to be an asshole. I wanted the conflict. And I'm like, wow, that's really telling. Like talk about punching me right back in the face just by what did you want me to do with that? And when you look at our industry and social media, when we fight about this latest nutrition concept, or somebody says this is right and somebody says this is wrong, we all pile in on these threads and we start calling names. We start creating our little groups and who's right and who's wrong. Leah McGrath, who was our guest host in the Nutrition Coaching Global Mastermind, she said, here's what I do, because as a dietitian, she wants to create better information sources for other dietitians. She said, whenever I see something that I think is just horribly wrong, dangerous information, she said, I private message the person. Hey, so-and-so, I'm so-and-so. Like, what did you mean by this? Like, there's evidence I'm not sure about, whatever. She doesn't just bam, punch them in the face in social media and embarrass them, because that's what a provocateur really wants. That's our intent when we do that. So, that's another thing we have to realize between the message and the messenger. If your intent with dealing with conflict is to bring conflict down, there's a whole set of behaviors that's way different than just slinging yourself in the middle of a fight online or just in a certain camp in the nutrition or training industry.
I think it shows a lot of humbleness. Is that a word? Humbleness? Yeah, it shows a lot of being humble, to open with inquiry, despite, quote unquote, knowing that person is wrong, because there might be a good chance that person is posting it just to be to provoke, right? But maybe that is their whole point. And so I think, especially possibly in this day and age, you're really going to catch someone off guard by asking, "Oh, what did you mean by this?" And you know what? All of a sudden, that, again, we're talking about those barriers. Boom, those barriers are gone. And if the ultimate goal of, civil discourse is to, I want to say change one's mind, but to open our minds to other possibilities and to different answers to other questions, I think it just starts with that, that simple inquiry of, well, what did you mean by this? And away we go, with having that talk, with having that discourse, because you've taken a situation where you're going to get someone's back up against the wall and they're never going to back. Like, people just don't back down because, like you said, people don't want to look embarrassed. People don't want to feel stupid. They want to be heard. They want to, have a discussion. And so, to have it, I mean, it's not an easy thing to do though, because, I know for myself, like I'll read something and my initial reaction is hackles up. Oh, that fucking idiot. Like, I can't believe they said that. And it's, I even have to take that step back and go, okay, no, like, what different angles can we look at this from? Maybe they do know something that I don't know, because guess what? I certainly don't know everything in the world. Like, it's just an impossible task. And so to be able to have, be that humble and to open with inquiry. I really do appreciate that approach. We need to be okay asking why a lot more. And then we also need to be okay with people asking us why a lot more. I've always found that, I'm someone who is just very naturally curious. I always want to ask why, like even just some of the simple things. So, well, why? Like, and what I have found is a lot of times it's like people in positions of power, bosses, they don't like that for some reason, at least in my experience. And it was never from questioning what they're doing. I just want to understand. Like, I just want a better idea of why we're doing that thing, because maybe I just don't understand. I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. So have it make sense. Like, explain it to me. So I think that is a very, very important trait for a lot of people that, we do need to maybe adopt a little bit more.
Yeah, I've learned through my own social media experience to be less of a puncher and more of an inquisitor. And in our same coaching mastermind we had this week, Dr. Fundero complimented Dr. Helms because she learned from him a phrase that is to always be charitable. So in any encounter, if your initial reaction is to insult or hack down or just fight, as a coach, as a client, as somebody who just wants to integrate and to like and be liked, is that really your best foot forward to just instantly go into a situation with arms flailing? And so I've learned because where I like to provoke a little bit is intentionally with my interest and background in social science. I'll sometimes post something that is pretty provocative, and I know that both sides of that issue are going to disagree with something. So my goal is to bring people in and start this discussion, and then we start having some real discussion. And I kind of facilitate actively some of these conversations. And, people come in there, they just start slinging mud and they're insulting and they're doing this and that. And, my temperament is to try and at the end of our conversation, have each other's respect. We still may walk away disagreeing, but let's get to some real meaningful dialogue. And it's really a beautiful thing when you see that happen. And a tact that I need to use more of is truly to just ask those questions. Like, somebody posts something, instead of going, no, it's like, why do you think that? Or, what about this? Or can you explain a little bit more about this side of your position? And it truly is conjoining. You get each other in a conversation instead of just immediately being defensive. And I think that's a huge, huge part of what's missing in our industry right now.
Yeah, you're just, not like the monkeys throwing rocks at each other, right? This is almost like, this is what separates us, right? Is the ability to, obviously there's much more that does separate us, but on that very basic, animal instinct level, to be able to have that discussion and not just throw rocks at each other, and to be able to see things from multiple viewpoints is the beauty of the human. And to be able to come together and have that discourse of discussion and trying to have a better understanding that, just because we may be just, on complete opposite ends of the spectrum in whatever, politics, religion, etc., you should still be able to have that discussion in a respectful, meaningful way that, does not resort to that mudslinging. And then you can come away from that conversation, like you said, respecting one another, despite, being on completely different ends. That's exactly what we need.
Politics, religion, training volume, and carbs, like all on the same level. That's what we argue at.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's fight wars over those things.
Hey, you'd be surprised in this industry.
Yeah, I'll finish with this. I've got a new podcast series coming out. I'm waiting until I get a few in the bank. It's called Nutrition Coaching Origin Stories, and I'm going through some pretty deep interviews with people. My very first one was with Lane Norton, and Lane and I have been friends for 21 years. And, I told Lane to his face in this interview, like you wake up looking to destroy people. You wake up looking for a fight. Like, who am I going to knock down today? And he said, well, I guess maybe it can look like that. And, but, he thinks he's the guardian of truth. Like, he's so anti-misinformation, disinformation. Sometimes what he doesn't realize is he's been wrong before, and yet he's out there, swinging that sword and trying to destroy people. And, he needed to actually maybe apologize for some of those things. But, even having this discussion, I was trying to convey that this is your personality and it's truly what brings you pleasure. So, and this is my point to this, Tyler. We have to know our intent. If I'm going into this conversation just to look right, like I have Facebook trolls, like whenever I post something, I know the same people are going to come in there and just start battling because they just want to try to look smart. They just want to look like they know as much as somebody else. And that's their intent. They don't want to make friends. I think for us, we have to really check and say, okay, do I really want to be seen as somebody who is a team player, somebody who's open-minded, somebody who's curious, or just the asshole who's going to defend one position and just love the fight? So I think that's the huge first step is you have to just gut check yourself, probably repeatedly, and just ask yourself, why am I engaging here at all?
Well, I'm definitely really looking forward to those podcasts and those conversations. I'm sure that's going to be great. But I think you kind of also, raise a pretty good point, or to build off of that point is, sure, you can come out, you can be the asshole, and guess what? You're going to have your tribe. You will definitely get a following, but you are doing it at the risk of cutting yourself off from the rest of the following that you could have. If we're looking at whatever, just a pie chart, you might get 25%, but guess you're missing out on that other 75. And so it's really, like you said, what is your intent? What is your ultimate goal? And if your ultimate goal is to give as much truth as possible, to be trusted as much as possible, and to reach the biggest audience as possible, which I think as educators, those should be the three pillars, of your goals, being that asshole and having that hill that you will die on is not going to get you there. You are going to be alone at some point because you refuse to change your viewpoint on something that you may be wrong on, or maybe you're not wrong on it, but you're still the message coming across is going to turn off so many other people.
That's the key. You use the word alone, and that's just it. And I want to go through the two layers here and we'll wrap up. So as I said, Lane, the person is a good friend of mine. Like I like Lane. His message, sometimes I completely disagree with the tone and the way he does it. That's fine. I can disagree with him even to his face. I can disagree with what he says. I don't have to sever that relationship. And so that's part of it. But what you just said is key. Like, because of that personality psychology angle, the right wing stalwart, this is black and white, every issue, and here's the truth, and I am the guardian of it. You're exactly right. Half the people will love you. You're our contrarian savior. Half of the people will hate you and disagree. That's why you can't have a conversation in the coaching or nutrition world without Lane's name coming up, because he is such a provocateur that he makes himself that center of attention. So you love him, you hate him, and that's all there is. Whereas other people, if you're taking the position of like an Eric Helms, let's be charitable. Why do I have to disagree? Why do I have to be ill-liked even by people with whom I disagree? I can disagree with people. We can still be friends. That's a rare commodity, and that takes real mature intent.
Yeah. And I think we've come back to this a lot too. In our previous ones, I think it's a very big underlying theme of our podcast is all of this requires you to know yourself on a high level. You have to be so comfortable with yourself. You have to be okay with all of yourself, and you have to know yourself, because you have to, be able to go into that conversation and have a hold on you so that you do not let that emotional hackle be that first reaction that you have. And so none of this works. Maybe it does, but I would say it makes it a lot harder if, we're on only a very basic level of understanding of who, we are as an individual.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing we fight against, because you're just describing emotional intelligence. And as a species, we really are drawn to conflict. Our closest phylogenetic relatives, baboons, chimpanzees, and so forth, you look at them in nature and they literally go to war every day. That's the first thing they do, like, Lane. And that becomes part of just who they are. That becomes their culture. And, it does work for some people because that's a coping mechanism to blanket those insecurities. But to your point, greater self-awareness can really be a more winsome, attractive trait. That's where you're going to integrate into communities much better. So if you're a coach or you're a competitor, you're a promoter, you're doing something because you want to be a vital part of a community, that's not the way to do it. The self-awareness, the conflict resolution, the curious inquisitor, the person who can disagree with a message and still embrace the messenger, like that's your only option. So I will say, I'll close with this. So H.G. Wells, the famous author of War of the Worlds and so forth, he said, human history, human civilization is a race between education and catastrophe. And I would say even this kind of psychological education is the difference. We have the ability to think reasonably and to even act against our initial impulses. That's what should be making us different. Doesn't always. But appreciate it, Tyler, very much. Great thoughts on conflict and avoiding it. Hopefully, conflict resolution, being more charitable, as Eric would say. So hope that's helpful to you guys. If you have any topics you'd like us to talk about, we just love trying to integrate the deepest things, the aspects and the type of incidences and context that we in the deep health community end up interfacing with. We're all ears. We want to make sure that we're in the conversation with you guys. So we will see you next time in the Mind Muscle Connection.